Oh, yeah, I don't mind walking up to some Run DMC every Sunday. That would be cool. Glad you're here. Welcome. I'm Carter Moss, pastor here. Welcome to New Break OB. Welcome back. And welcome if it's your first time. Really appreciate you giving us a chance. And we'd love to meet you and just say hi afterwards, make you feel welcome. But glad you're here. I'm Carter, pastor here. I am a child of the 80s. I admit it. I know it makes me feel pretty old, but I'm not ashamed, man. I love the 80s. So many awesome movies for sure, right? They've held up over time. Showed them to my kids. They still love them. The music, I think, held up over time. Maybe the fashion hasn't so much. I don't know about that. I'll admit, though, I totally gave in to all the different, fashion trends of the 80s. I was totally that. Parachute pants, man, I was all about. They're just so comfortable. I can't help it. I got to be honest. If they were still in, I would probably still try to wear them. They're just so, comfortable and, they can double as a parachute, I guess. I don't know why people need to do that. No, here's one of the weirder trends. I don't know why I actually got into it, but there were these shirts that were hyper color, and you could it would actually leave a handprint. You could do that. That's still weird to walk up to people and do that to their shirt, but you could do that or breathe on it. It would change colors, but it's really just kind of high-tech tie-dye, right, honestly. So that would still fit in OB, I think, pretty well if they still had that. Although the cardigan, man, oh yeah, I had a bunch of those. Beth says you got to have the cardigan over a turtleneck and then the gold chain down right there, right? And that's like just high school right there. But I do, I may also still have a couple that didn't really get rid of it. Everything was pink. Even guys wore pink in the 80s. So there you go, pink, Run DMC. There's a tag. Oh yeah, this isn't really mine from being a kid, but someone got it for me recently, and so I was like, thank you for helping me to relive my childhood. I haven't found the occasion to wear this yet. I don't know where that's the right thing to wear, but yeah, so totally gave into all the 80s stuff, but then the 90s came, and everything changed in the 90s, so then the 90s, it just had to be all about, the flannels, so I owned a ton of all the flannels. I still have some. My wife doesn't know why I have them when we live in San Diego, and there's really no reason to wear them, but they were all the flannels all the time. Of course, that was more like the camo pants and the boots, but I totally gave in. I'll admit, I just tried to follow the trend. Obviously, I just gave up on fashion now, and I just wear whatever, but no, but I tried to for a while. But here's why I talk about that. Don't worry, we're not going to talk about clothes today, but no, I talk about this because Apostle Paul, one of his favorite metaphors for whatever reason throughout a lot of his letters seem to be clothes. He talks a lot about this idea of us kind of putting on kind of this new kind of person we're supposed to be as we follow Jesus and kind of taking off our old clothes of people that we used to be. So it's pretty cool that he uses a metaphor that's just super timeless, that all humans can relate to. So he talks about that a lot. We've been working our way through his letter to the Ephesians. We don't usually do that as a church. We don't usually, for us at New Break anyway, spend this long in one book, but we thought we'd try it this year. Help us all try to really get deep into kind of one book in the Word of God, just kind of see what God could speak to us as we dig into it. And of course, we bring in other stories as well. But this letter Paul wrote from prison, thrown into prison for his faith, and he writes a letter to a brand new church full of people that are trying to figure out how to navigate their life, how to live out their faith. So still super relevant to all of us. We're in chapter 4. He spent the first 3 chapters talking all about our identity. Here's who you're meant to be as a Jesus follower. Here's what's different about you. And so there was a lot of identity, kind of changing our thoughts, our perspective. Now starting in chapter 4, for the last 3 chapters, he gets super practical. So now here's how to walk this way. Here's how to walk out the way of faith. Because following Jesus is meant to look like something. It's meant to look like something, not just fashion-wise, I used to wear, these kind of clothes. Now I wear Christian t-shirts. Not like that necessarily, but, it's meant to look like something. We're meant to walk it out, right? The whole idea, kind of walk the talk. So following Jesus isn't just a change in our theology, our thoughts, our beliefs, our ideas. It's meant to look like something. We're meant to look different, to walk different. And so that's what Paul's talking about, and that's what we'll be in kind of next couple months, even as we head into Christmas. So lots of practical stuff, so I hope that's helpful for you. I often wonder if for a lot of people, even that have been around church, they've been going to church, trying to kind of do the church thing, and honestly, I don't see it making that big of a difference in my life. Honestly, it's just kind of another, my weekends are busier now. That's about it. And listen, I get that, and I think what's missing is this piece of it. It's meant to change how we live, meant to change our daily lives as we go to school, as we go to work, as we're with roommates or with our kids or around extended family or surfing or at the gym. Kind of every way that we live is meant to change, meant to look different when we walk out our faith. So if that's something that's been missing for you, that's what Paul wants to speak into us and remind us of. So in chapter 4 here, we're in verse 17. We've already worked our way through the other ones, and you can always watch our old messages on our website or our Facebook page. But Paul starts with the word so, verse 17. He's saying, all right, because of all the stuff I've told you, I told you what Jesus followers are meant to look like, what the Holy Spirit can do in you. So here's how you're meant to live. Here's how you walk it out. It says, so I tell you this, I insist on it in the Lord, that you can just hear the urgency of his language. I insist, you must no longer live as the Gentiles do in the futility of their thinking. The Gentiles, these are people that didn't believe in God, didn't grow up in those ways at all. And so when Paul's talking about them, that's kind of his example of people who aren't walking in the ways of God. Paul ends up totally evangelizing to Gentiles and having a deep love for them. But they're kind of his example. So that's who he's talking about. He says they are darkened in their understanding. They're separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. Having lost all sensitivity, they've given themselves over to sensuality so as to indulge in every kind of impurity so they can be full of greed. Yeah, Paul didn't really care about being politically correct. He didn't really try to candy coat anything for people. He just kind of comes right out and says it. And he starts by saying, listen, if you're going to put on new clothes, you got to start by, you got to take off what you already have. Sort of like the what not to wear, right? So here's what we're not meant to walk like anymore. And that's why he starts by the idea of you're meant to put it off. And I think we're meant to put off something. It means that we're all already wearing it. That it already comes natural to us, right? And Paul says, you got to take that off first before you put on your new clothes. And think about it, us just as human beings, how much comes naturally to us? You can ask parents of toddlers and they'll say, I never taught them the word mine. I don't know where they learned that. They just seem to know it. And then it becomes their favorite word. I didn't teach them how to lie. They just seem to know how to do it. We kind of have that. It's already on us. Paul says we're meant to put it off. You're meant to take off this old way that you used to walk. You're meant to identify kind of what doesn't fit anymore. And I know guys, for sure, at least, a lot that I know I've struggled with. I still have clothes that, for whatever reason, I have way too many, T-shirts in my closet. My wife's like, when are you going to throw it away? Now my kids like, when are you going to get rid of some of those? I don't know why guys want to pile it up. I think about my dad, even when it's time to throw away a T-shirt, instead of actually, give it away to Goodwill, he just, repurpose it. You can use it as, a rag to dry the car. Does anybody else do that? Now you can dry the car with it. You can use it to wipe down stuff outside. It's just let go of this thing, right? But the reason it's hard to let go of our clothes sometimes it's just because they're still really comfortable. We like the older baggy clothes. Well, some of us have to get rid of our clothes because they're tighter now, but I don't want to share about those things that I have. But some of them, right, they're just so comfortable. They're just comfortable. I'll admit there's some I've kept just more for nostalgia. I have one old teacher I just remember, the day my mom bought it for me. I was in college, went out shopping, and she got it. It's I don't wear it anymore, but I just like it because kind of the nostalgia kind of piece of it. I just kind of remember that day having it. That kind of happens with some of the sinful patterns in our lives. This feels comfortable, Gossip. This kind of feels good. This kind of feels comfortable to kind of sit around, sort of gossip about other classmates, people at work. Slander, just feel kind of comfortable. Paul mentions greed. That's one. It kind of feels good to kind of think about what's the next bigger thing that I want. And so I just started thinking about, I think that's why it's so hard to let go of some of that stuff. It feels really comfortable, especially if it's a sin pattern we've lived in for a long time. It can feel really comfortable, even have a little nostalgia. Well, I've always kind of done this. Even kind of becomes a part of who I am, right? In a weird way, I would say, well, yeah, I would really want to quit that behavior, but it's kind of a part of me. Kind of almost don't know who I am without it. Paul's saying, gotta learn how to let go of that stuff, how to put it off. He goes on and kind of, as I read there through verse 18, and he talks about here's what people do, not Gentiles, us, all right? And he's kind of describing like this downward spiral. And again, Paul doesn't pull any punches. He comes right out with it. He says, we start kind of rejecting God's ways, right? And even if we think we don't do that, maybe there's times when we think, that's kind of old-fashioned, right? We talked a little bit of that last week. That's old-fashioned. Come on, it's 2018. Nobody lives by that anymore. We reject God's ways. We want to live life on our own terms because it's like, I know what's best for me. So we start to kind of go that way. We get we can even be willfully ignorant. Kind of ignorance is bliss. I just kind of want to not think about like long-term consequences of what I'm doing or how maybe it's going to hurt other people. We kind of don't want to listen. The longer you get kind of stuck in our patterns, we get more defensive, more prideful, more unreasonable. All right, so Paul's kind of describing this spiral. We start by doing that. Then he talks about we start getting insensitive. Right, so we sort of not even think anymore about what I do. It might actually hurt other people. It's maybe actually doing damage to me, but I'm just insensitive to all that stuff. Then he kind of goes on and says they just gave themselves completely over to all kinds of impurity. That's when we kind of fall into the, if it feels good, do it. I think we get a little bit of like muscle memory with our sin, a little muscle memory, a little kind of like, that's sort of my pattern, feels good. I worked at this place for a while, and like the guys I worked with, we would try to hang out and stuff, go out to lunch, even go out at night sometimes, see movies and hanging out. And kind of our pastime when we got together to hang out would just be kind of gossip about everybody at work, kind of complain about what needs to change, probably slander, all this kind of stuff. And honestly, it was like muscle memory. It was weird. It's like nobody feels better after doing this, but we never seem to stop it. I don't know if you've ever had that. Hope it's not only me, but, right? And I just think about that. Yeah, it's just that muscle memory. It's just that kind of the comfortable clothes. I just kind of get back into that. And I think that's what Paul's saying. You just start to just kind of give into all that stuff. Just kind of give yourself over to kind of any of it. Then he mentions greed. Isn't that interesting? We don't hear that one listed very often. Christians love to rank sin sometimes, and the ones they think are the worst and the most abhorrent. I never hear greed in that list. That might be one of the most visible ones in all of America, though, right? And Paul puts it right here in the list, Greed, that's a tough one, My youngest boy just got his very first job ever, mentioned a few weeks ago, working at Chick-fil-A. So I get lots of Christian chicken coming home now, so I'm excited for that. But if you ever see him, he's working at the one by Sports Arena. And so he literally just got his very first paycheck. And when all you've ever gotten is like money twice a year, birthday and Christmas, that's it. We've offered to pay him allowance to do things at home, but he doesn't seem to want to leave the bedroom and do any work. And so, but now he's working hard. And so he actually got his very first paycheck, and no joke, already had 22 items in his cart on Amazon. Before I ever had the paycheck in, he's already like, I already know everything I'm using it on, Dad. I'm like, great, right? And then we have a little conversation about tithing and some of that stuff, which he is going to do, which is very cool. But, I'm just thinking, man, I got to help him get a handle on this like really young, right? Because we know how much harder it is the older you get. The more money you're entrusted with, that doesn't get any easier. It's like once I make a little bit more, then I'll save more for sure, and I'll definitely be more generous. How's that working out, right? We're making, a lot of us, maybe more than we did when we were younger. It doesn't get any easier. And so we got to learn that when we're younger. College students, of course, great age to learn that as well, right? Before it gets harder. So it's interesting that Paul kind of includes that one. I just find, he doesn't mention very many things here, but he puts that right away. So Paul's trying to help us understand, you got to put off all these ways. Listen, this is going to be hard. I'm not going to lie to you. They come natural to you. You're already wearing them. They're comfortable clothes. But, listen, Paul isn't doing this to shame anybody, and that's not what we do here either at New Break. All right, but I have to understand the problem, though, before I get to the solution, before I get to the really good news. And so if I can come face to face that my sin, honestly, it's worse than we ever admit it is. But then we can talk about how grace is more amazing than we ever think that it is. Right? And how we love to say it around here is this, that God actually loves you just as you are. So that's the good news. Even as we come in with all our old clothes on and our muscle memory, sinful patterns and greed, impurity, insensitivity. And God says, I love you anyway. My son died for you anyway. And not only that, I love you so much as you are. And I love you too much to leave you that way. All right? I love you so much, I want to help you discover the best version of you, the way that I actually wired you up to be. I want to help. He actually wants to transform us into something different. And that's the piece a lot of us miss, right? I know growing up, I thought believing in God is just all about eternity. It doesn't really have anything to do with my life here. I just kind of grit in my teeth and bear it, and then hopefully get to eternity, and hopefully God's in a good mood on that day, and I can make it in. But God actually cares about this life too, though, right? He's up to something. He doesn't just say kind of like as you were, so all your addictions, all your shame or guilt or past mistakes or whatever you feel kind of stuck in, you kind of have to live with that to your deathbed. But don't worry, once you get to eternity, things will get better. No, he says, I'm doing something here now. I want to transform you. I want to help you put on something new. And so even though Paul's pretty hard-hitting, he doesn't stop there. He goes on in verse 20, he says, that, however, is not the way of life that you learned. That's not how you learned to live when you heard about Jesus, when you were taught in him in accordance with the truth that's in Jesus. He says you were taught with your former way of life to put off your old self, take off those clothes, which is being corrupted in its deceitful desires. He says instead, you're to be made new. Made new. Paul uses that in a lot of his letters. You're a new creation. God's doing something new in you. To be made new in the attitude of your minds, to put on the new self that was created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. That's pretty cool. Paul says you're actually created, the longer you follow Jesus when you're doing it right, you're going to look more and more like him. You're going to see some of these beautiful things come out of you that are going to look more like him. You were created to look like him. So he talks again, that idea of putting off old clothes, putting on new ones. Made me kind of think, I grew up kind of church where it was this idea of like put on your Sunday best. Here at OB we're kind of like come as you are. I'm still waiting for the day someone's just going to walk in their wetsuit out of the ocean. I think it would be pretty cool because then I'll know we're truly reaching locals and people really know they can just come in as they are. So, but I grew up in the place where it's like, kind of your Sunday best, and I read these words and, I'm not pointing fingers anywhere else. I'll just point them at me, and I think, man, I wonder how often as Christians we're more concerned about wearing nice clothes for God than what we're really wearing in our character, in our behavior. And that's what Paul's talking about here. Put on this new self. God's up to something in you. God wants to do this major transformation in you. I kind of think about, one of the main transformations we can all relate to would be, the idea of like a caterpillar. Think about it. You've been this grubby little slimy creature. You're slow. All you ever do is crawl around in the dirt. It takes you days to move 100 yards, right? And think about that. And you're just eating off the ground and squishy. They're honestly kind of gross when you really think about it. And then one day you sort of go to sleep, right? And then I just picture what goes through a caterpillar's mind when he first wakes up out of the cocoon. It's like, does he just look in the mirror and go, shut up? Right? No way, right? How do you go from this to that thing? And now instead of crawling this slow, you're just flying anywhere you want to go. Guys, that would be like you're your normal grubby selves throughout your life. And that would be like you wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and you see Brad Pitt staring back at you. And you'd be like, shut up, right? No way, how did I do this? Ladies, this would be like you, and then you wake up and you look in the mirror and you look exactly how you look right now. Perfect and gorgeous and awesome. Hey, I'm not that stupid. I say a lot of dumb things. That isn't going to be one of them. I'm smart enough to know that. But, right? But men can relate anyway. And so transformation, right? And that's how radical. Honestly, I want to think about it. That's how radical God says, I want you to put on a new self. You're meant to just wear something new. And it's pretty cool. Maybe you've met people like that. My job, I get to meet a lot of people. I say, man, Carter, if you would have seen me back in the day, you wouldn't even want to talk to me. You wouldn't want to be around me. I was the biggest jerk. Well, they usually use other words, but I was the biggest jerk to everybody, right? And man, I just see the stuff God's doing in me. Listen, God still does that all the time, man. All ages, all life stages. That's what God's still doing. Radically changing people. They put on their new stuff for their new identity. I was thinking about how people do that with football. I can't help it because it's kicking off this weekend. Can I get an amen? All is right with the world again, right? And you're like, yeah, if you stop talking, I can get home and watch it. So that's true. But no, I was just thinking about that because, like on draft day, the very first thing they do when they get drafted, right? It's like put on like the jersey or like the hat. I don't want to bring back sad memories, Rest in peace, Chargers, sorry. But that's okay. Hey, it's okay. Phillip Rivers is still around. He's still awesome. Look how young he was back then. Wasn't that cool? He didn't get drafted by them, but he got traded to them right away. And by the way, just quick, I think what's cool about Phillip Rivers, and it's fine if you don't like him or the Chargers, but he really took seriously, like, I want to represent San Diego. He actually still lives here. San Diego, even though his team doesn't. And he, by the way, I believe he is a strong Christ follower and not perfect, right? But I think he does a lot of things to try to represent that. So I just think it's kind of that cool example of like, I understand my new identity. We obviously know a lot of athletes that don't care about representing their team very well and just live however they want to live, right? Probably like Paul described in the first part of the chapter. But it's that idea of kind of taken seriously, right? When Paul says you're meant to put on this. And he says, by the way, it's good news. He said, that's not the way of life that you learned, right? And so what's good news is you and I can actually learn this new way to live. So it can be taught. I can unlearn the old things that I used to do, and then he says that we have the power to learn what we're doing now. That when we decide to follow Jesus, that actually isn't the end. Some of us think, I made it to the end goal. I'm in now. I'm in the club. I'm in the kingdom. I'm in the church. It's actually like, well, now's the starting line. Now I get to start this whole new life, start this idea of putting things on. Start looking different, as Paul says. Start being made new. Once you're a Christ follower, what's meant to happen is that you're not who you once were. And for some of us, when we wake up in the morning, we look in the mirror. It's not Brad Pitt looking back. We look in the mirror and all we see is failed marriage. Or we just see addiction, We see unemployed or bankrupt, alone, dropout. But God would come in and say, you aren't who you used to be. You aren't who you used to be. You're made new. You get something new. You get to become someone new. And of course, where Paul starts here, he says we're meant to be made new in our minds. Now, Paul talks about becoming a new creation in lots of places in his letters, and to the Corinthians, he says you're going to become a whole new creation. That's how he said it. Your old self is gone. Your new has come. So he loved writing about this. But notice, he's helping us be practical here. If you and I are really going to live new and live differently, well, it starts by changing our minds. You got to change your thoughts. Paul knew that all your actions, your behaviors, your decisions, they actually flow out of your thoughts. And again, that's where a lot of Christians get stuck. We come into church, I feel bad about my behavior, I need to fix it, so I try really hard all week, make it to about Tuesday or Wednesday, I didn't really fix anything, come back and kind of start the cycle all over again. And that's because we're trying to change behaviors, external stuff, and Paul says, no, you got to dig in deeper. It's got to start in here, right? I mean, if my mind and my heart are still hanging on to the same old clothes and wearing that same old comfortable kind of sinful patterns, then my behaviors are never going to change. So he says, you start by changing what's in your thoughts, changing your mind. He writes a lot about what's in our mind, lots of his letters. Let me just show you one. This is a great one. Great one worth memorizing, by the way. Memorize what's meant to be in our mind. And I love how he says it here in his letter, also written from prison, to the Philippians. He says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is lovely or right or admirable, excellent, praiseworthy, he says, think about those things. Here's my question for you, and this is not a shaming question. It's just like a self-assessment run, right? How do I apply this verse? And I'll ask it of me too. What percentage of my thoughts this last week fit into any of those categories? Right? Don't worry about anybody else, right? Let me just ask myself, what percentage, right? Because some of my thoughts were complaining. Some were probably coveting a little bit, kind of critical. Some were maybe a little discontent, a little greedy. But, how many were any of them lovely things? Were they admirable? Were they praiseworthy? right? And so we just got to kind of assess that, right? And hopefully, again, it's not feel bad. It's, oh, well, maybe that's why I'm not living any different. I look at my whole week and my mind's never changed, never full of any of this stuff, right? So then I got to ask the question, well, what am I feeding my mind? Right? It's sort of like garbage in, garbage out kind of thing. So what am I feeding it, right? Am I challenging kind of what comes natural? Again, just kind of whatever comfortable clothes. Am I changing what comes natural? What are we feeding into our mind? And listen, that can look different for different people. For some people, I was talking to one guy, said, man, on the way to work, like worship music. I just put it in. That's what I listen to in the car because that's like the only thing that sets my mind right for the day. I'm like, that's pretty cool, right? Some people like that. You don't have to like that, but that's one way people really get that into their head. One way that I think that does apply to all Christ followers, we spent the whole time last week talking about it, is getting the Word of God in you, right? The more I get God's words in me, His character, His way of thinking, the more that just changes everything else. And as we said last week, we'd love to help you do that. We'll give you a free Bible today if you need one, help you learn it in life group, help send you a reading plan, just anything we can do, help get it in you. I find the really challenging one, how do I challenge my default, kind of thoughts and actions? Like when I walk in to like a new situation, maybe it's sort of a new job or you're having to live somewhere new or whatever, is my first thought like, here's all the stuff that I don't have. I mean, honestly, that's kind of what first comes to my mind, sort of discontent. Here's the things I don't like. How do I challenge that and learn instead to think like gratitude, right? What has God provided through this? What is God doing in this season, right? Kind of challenging kind of those default thoughts. I think the other example I was thinking about is when it comes to other people and in our relationships, we teach this a lot in premarital counseling. So here you go, free relationship skill. When it comes to other people, am I believing the best or assuming the worst? Right? There's kind of this example of like, if like husband's always leaving clothes on the floor, wife's like, he doesn't care what I do. He never even thinks about it. He never, just jump right to assume the worst. Or is there a believe the best? Does he not know where they go or just been in a hurry or doesn't understand how valuable this is to me? And I never realized like how much it's easy to do that with coworkers or roommates or spouses. You instantly want to jump to, I just assume the worst. It's an incredible skill to learn how do I challenge that default thought and start to believe the best. Obviously the best isn't always true, but can I start there, right? And then have, like a conversation. At New Break, we, because we want to have healthy staff relationships, and so we kind of use this phrase, fill the void with good intentions, right? When it's like, I have no idea why they did this. Well, then why don't you fill that void with good intentions first, and then go find out, right? So believe in the best, fill the void with good intentions. Remember, you got to challenge what's coming naturally to your mind if you want to have any kind of transforming of your mind, because Paul says it all starts with our thoughts. Then, of course, I got to have actions that match my thoughts. I don't always know how to match outfits and with clothes and stuff, but I do know, right? Actions got to match thoughts. I mean, our whole world, unchurched world says that all the time, right? You got to walk the talk. We all have a word for people that talk and believe one thing and walk a different way. It's hypocrite, right? That's really what a hypocrite is you say one thing, you're doing something else. And so, really for all of humanity, not just Christ followers, but, really having integrity means I walk, right, in a way that matches the talk. I find actions that match up with my thinking. And there's all sorts of ways that plays out in our lives, and we could talk about, hundreds of things, but let's at least start here, right? So here's just a quick list. Here you go. At least one practical way you could put this into action this week. It comes from Apostle Paul, and a different letter he wrote, this time to the Colossians, and he says it like this. He says, as God's chosen people, he's always reminding people their identity. That's what he did in Ephesians for 3 chapters. Remember, you're different now. You're God's chosen people. You're dearly loved people. And notice, here's his metaphor again. Clothe yourself. I got to put on something new that I didn't already have. It didn't come natural to me. Clothe yourself. And he gives us at least 5 ideas here. Compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. And I would look at that list. Sometimes we read those lists, go, yeah, that's a lot of good stuff. That's a lot. It's hard. I don't really have any of that. Would sort of get overwhelmed. So listen, here's what I want you to do. Just pick one of those. Let's pick one right now. They're all biblical. We should get around to all of them in our lives. But for this week, what's the one out of there? I can't tell you. Let God kind of speak it to you, even kind of in the rest of the service. What's the one where God would say, this is something new I want to put on you? You're going to be kinder than you've ever been. Right? You're going to be more patient than you've ever been. More gentle, maybe. Kind of depends our personality type. Right? More compassionate instead of just living, like we said earlier, in ignorance. I just want to ignore kind of people that are hurting around me. I got my own stuff to deal with. I'm going to learn compassion. Right? What is that thing? Maybe not even just this week. If you really want to take it on, we got about, 4 months left in the year. Say, God, just do that one in me. Then by the time you get to Christmas, you're going to be this awesome person at the family gathering and be like, you're so compassionate and kind, right? But, just really kind of, because, it just takes time, right, for things to develop in us. So I just challenge you, I encourage you, let God develop, just one of those in you. Think about what that would be for you today, all right, before you leave. Because that's what Paul, again, he inspires us, reminds us to do. Put on the new self. We're meant to reflect who God is more and more. By the way, that's a huge part of why we're big fans of life groups, because I hope this time helps you do that. But sometimes to really help us live it out, I need people that are actually checking in with me regularly in my life. So that's a huge part. Life groups help us know what we're meant to put off, help us learn how to put on new stuff. So again, we'd love to help you find one. We got men's, women's, college, married couples, all different stuff. If you don't know what group to start in, I'll just plug my own. I lead one for people that are either brand new to New Break, or you've been around but haven't been connected or haven't really ever been in a group. It's on Tuesday nights, and it meets here at the campus. We do have childcare for it, and it just goes for the next 10 weeks, so just till about Thanksgiving. So just let me know. I'd love to have you in it. Always a cool mix of people, kind of all ages in it and stuff. But that's part of why we're huge with life groups, because they can be what helps us know what to kind of put on and put off. I wanted to share with you real quick before we close was somebody that, I got lots of stories. It's just been fun to watch people change, or watch God change who people are, like everything we're talking about today, because God still does that. He's in the business of doing that. And there's one lady, man, she was awesome. I got to eventually baptize her. Her name was Shelly, and I just wanted you to hear her story. She said, I used to think that I was a Christian because I believed in God and I tried really hard to be a good person. To me, that's what being a Christian was all about. I would pray to God, but my prayers were for mostly all the answers to all the why questions. I like her honesty in that. Why is my life so hard? Why do I feel like I'm the only one that really understands me? I would ask God to keep my family healthy and safe and happy. It was always about me and for him to help me get the things I want in my life that I thought I needed. Then my father passed away. This was a wake-up call that life wasn't just about me. She says my life was about to be changed forever. I started going to church every week, listening to the sermons, taking in the music, and feeling that so many of the services were directed right at me. I could slowly feel the Holy Spirit in me. So I joined my first small group, and I began to really read the Bible. I began to make friends with the people in my small group. Each time I heard the word baptism mentioned at church, I felt like God was nudging me, kind of tapping me on the shoulder. So I did it. And since the day I got baptized, I've felt calmness about my life. I felt a better understanding that whatever should happen in my life, God is in control. It's not my will, it's his will. I get it now. God is so good. And then she said, this is a brand new beginning for me. And I love that. She did not see her Christian life as I've arrived and I'm done. She says, it's just the new beginning. I'm just starting. Baptism was the start. Getting in small group was the start of it. And it's cool that she let God challenge her old way of thinking. You could hear in there, right? To a new way of thinking. By the way, just the power of what happens when we're impacted. It changed her kids as well. Good friends with her kids. They were kind of early teenage years. And now her son's at this Christian college. He decided he wants to become a worship leader. And one of her daughters found Jesus. The other one's still kind of running away from God. But it's just been cool. And then it changed her husband. He really had never understood the gospel before. That's what happens, right? When we let God kind of get a hold of our heart, kind of start to put on our new self. So do you want to let God do that in you? Again, he loves you exactly as you are, but too much to just leave you that way. So do you want to let him? Do you want to just settle for kind of these same old patterns in your life? Or do you want to let him come in and do something new? And honestly, maybe you've never started on this journey of following Jesus. And we're super thankful that God sends us people like that all the time. Just know you're always super welcome here. This is a safe place for you to explore and to wrestle with your faith. We're never going to shove anything down your throat. Just a place for you to wrestle and ask questions. But we're always going to ask you what we believe is the most important question is, what do you believe about Jesus? You know? Do you want to be a part of your life? And I hope that as you listen today, you find out this isn't just some fire insurance for eternity, that it's God actually wants to change something in you now, that you'll get to see some new version of yourself you've never seen. That's what he does. And as we close in prayer and we'll take communion, I hope, because I know it's kind of a challenging kind of stuff here in this, I hope that what you hear through it all is it's all because of God's grace. But that's what we get to walk in. He already loves me just as I am. Right? I don't have to clean up my act to look better to him. I just come to him, and his grace already loves me in that.